Hello and welcome. You are watching News Now with me, Anjali Palod, and a new chapter in India-China relations unfold today. For the first time in 7 years, Prime Minister Modi has travelled to China, signalling strengthening of ties between two of world's biggest economies. Just a while ago, PM Modi arrived to a red carpet welcome in China's Tianjin, where he was received by Minister for Industry and Information Technology Li Lecheng, Tianjin Government Director Yu Yunlin, and Chinese Ambassador. PM Modi is in China primarily to attend the annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is slated for tomorrow and September 1. My colleague Sumita is now joining in to get us the latest updates from there.
Absolutely, Anjali. So this is the biggest story at the moment. The Prime Minister arriving in China after a gap of almost 5 to 7 years. This is essentially after the Galwan standoff, which took place in 2020. After ties became frosty between the two countries. But in the past few days, we've seen with several visits that have happened, both from the Indian side to China, from the Chinese side to India. And of course, there's a thaw in ties between the two nations. But this particular visit is specifically of significance, given the fact that this is coming in after Donald Trump imposed 50% tariffs, and those tariffs came into effect. And of course, 25% of those tariffs was slapped on India for buying Russian crude oil. So since we're talking about Russia, there's going to be Vladimir Putin as well, along with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Prime Minister is expected to hold bilaterals with both the leaders. And of course, there's been conjecture for a while that if there could be an alternative to the Quad bloc, which is led by the United States, if China, India, and Russia, the RIC bloc could in fact emerge as an alternative to a global world order that's dominated by America. And of course, we've seen China having criticized unilateral policies, quote unquote, by Donald Trump. In fact, if you remember, if we're talking about tariffs, if you remember earlier this year, when the Liberation Day tariffs were first announced by President Trump, there was a triple-digit number that was announced on China. And of course, there's been retaliation from China, from both the United States as well. And of course, there was a 90-day relief once again granted to Russia. However, the 50% tariffs are currently in effect. So definitely that's going to be, key to this visit. That's definitely forms the key optics as part of this visit. Will be interesting to see when the Prime Minister meets President Xi Jinping. As you were just stating a short while back, a red carpet welcome was accorded to the Prime Minister. Definitely, this is a major messaging that's coming in from China. We did see the Foreign Minister as well, Wang Yi, come to India. There have been several statements that have been made by Russian embassy executives as well, spokespersons as well, on how the imposition of tariffs by the United States has been rather unilateral, and China has been very vocal as far as that is concerned. But the other big thing to watch out for as far as this visit is concerned is India is looking at a complete cutoff as far as terrorism is concerned. So China will have to perhaps come out, because it was not mentioned in the SCO Defense Ministers meeting where Rajnath Singh was present, and he did not sign that document. So India is going to present a strong case against terrorism that's emanating from the Pakistani soil. But let's take a look at the agenda in terms of what could be expected. Tomorrow is essentially when is the big day, and bilateral meeting with the Chinese president is slated for tomorrow. And then, of course, later on, leaders start gathering for the SCO Summit. And Monday is when the SCO Summit actually begins. The SCO leaders meeting begins. And that's essentially when the Prime Minister will also be meeting with President Putin.
Right, thanks Sumita for bringing us those details. And to further decode the significance of this visit by Prime Minister Modi in China, we are joined on the show by Veena Sikri, the Indian former High Commissioner to Bangladesh, and Manoj Joshi, a distinguished fellow at ORF. Welcome both of you to the show. First of all, this is Prime Minister Modi's first visit to China after the Galwan clash. So first to you, Veena, want to understand the significance of this visit and what should we be watching out for from both the sides?
Well, I think this is indeed a very important visit, and that's for several reasons. I think, first of all, we cannot forget that we are in this whole universe of tariffs now. But I think that I don't want to link this visit exclusively with the tariffs, because India's foreign policy is based on strategic autonomy. And it's not a zero-sum game for us. We believe in multi-alignment. We believe strongly in multipolarity. So we are continuously developing our relations with other individual countries, other groups of countries on their own right, on their own strength. And so that is why we have always valued the relationship with the SCO, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, because this organization brings together the Central Asian countries, among others. Of course, there's Iran, the Central Asian countries, of course, there's Pakistan, India, Russia, and China. But we value our relationship with the Central Asian countries a lot, and we are always trying to overcome the difficulties of connectivity and to build on this, to create the connectivities that we can develop our relations there. And I think one of the other aspects of SCO that we like a lot, that we focus on a lot, is this aspect of anti-terrorism. You know, the counterterrorism agenda of the SCO against radicalism, against extremism, against separatism. So this is very valuable for us. The other two pillars of SCO are the trade and economic cooperation, and of course the cultural linkages. So the SCO, the participation in SCO is important. We do know that ever since the Galwan incident of 2020, there's been a sharp break in the relationship between India and China. And it's only last year in Kazan during the BRICS summit when Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping met in Kazan that a thaw came in, and we already had at that time the first decisions to correct the situation at Galwan, first to resume the patrolling, and then now to talk about disengagement as well. So this has been, an important movement in that direction. So obviously in the SCO, during Prime Minister's visit to Tianjin for the SCO Summit, his bilateral meetings will have considerable importance. And I think here the meetings with President Xi Jinping, there may be more than one, even two meetings with President Xi Jinping, which will be significant. Meeting with President Putin will be important, and other bilateral. So these are always a very valuable occasion to have these bilaterals, to renew the bilateral relationship and build upon it. But certainly the meeting with President Xi Jinping will be getting the highest attention, because we're looking at that after Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in India very recently, and he made certain announcements about, resumption of rare earths and tunnel boring machines and fertilizer supply to India. We have to see if these are going to be implemented. So are these going to be, strengthened? Are these decisions going to be reinforced by the meeting of the two leaders at the summit level? So this is all a lot that we have to watch out for. So this is both from the bilateral and the regional point of view very important. I would like to also say one more thing, that Prime Minister Modi coming to Tianjin after his very successful visit to Japan, I think this is a significant factor, because in Japan we saw that Japan has agreed to invest $68 billion in India over the next 10 years. And there are very, very important decisions on, the Japanese technology, Indian talent, make in India and make for the world. They're very important aspects of what our Prime Minister said when he was in Japan. And this is all the people in SCO, President Xi Jinping and others, would have taken great note of Prime Minister's very successful visit to Japan, as he just before he landed in Tianjin. So these are the various reasons why I think I would attach a lot of importance to this this visit, the next 2 days.
Right, Veena. So there's lots to watch out for. But before I come to you, Mr. Joshi, we would like to go across to Srinjoy Chaudhary from Times Network to also give us the latest updates that we're seeing from China.
Prime Minister has already reached. He's at this hotel, and he was very warmly welcomed. Now there are still, while the welcome was very warm, while we are working towards a better relationship, there are still things that have to be sorted out. And of course, there is the border that has to be sorted out. I mean, yes, it's been a long time since Galwan, but the troops are, while they're not inside India, they're across or on the other side of the line of actual control, but they're not that far away. And ideally, they should go back to where they came from 5 years ago. That's really one. Then, if you look at Operation Sindoor, there was considerable Chinese help during that time to Pakistan. That's the second thing. Thirdly, 80% of Pakistani weapons are really Chinese made. That's a third thing. Then you have the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that runs through POK. Now that's another problem. There are a lot of problems. The trade is another one. But it's important to talk because it's very important to continue to talk rather than do anything else. Because as to give you a Kennedy-esque statement, let us not negotiate out of fear, but let us not fear to negotiate. And this is exactly what is happening. Because unless you talk, and it must be said that Wang Yi was here, he met Jaishankar, he met Ajit Doval. Now you would expect some forward movement as a result, because when Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi are talking, and he's gone all the way to Tianjin for the SCO, you would expect him to come back with something. And that would be the effort to have that would have happened when when the Foreign Minister of China was here. That was when things would have got worked out. And perhaps a little bit more would be necessary when the two leaders meet, so that at least both sides can say, okay, we've had a successful visit.
Right. Thanks, Trinjoy. And now that we have all of that context set, let's come back to our guests. Mr. Joshi, I'd like to take this question with you. On the economic side, it is impossible to miss the backdrop of the US tariffs that the SCO Summit is being held with. And do you see India and China sort of coming to a common ground at the SCO Summit, or being strategic competitors, the economic logic might just take a back seat?
Well, the thing is that despite all that has been said, the fact of the matter is that the India-China effort towards renormalizing their situation has begun a long time ago. It began last year. At the beginning of last year, when the Prime Minister gave an interview to Newsweek magazine, he made this very clear that stable relations with China were extremely important. Subsequently, when the last year's economic survey came out in July, it was made clear there that it was recommended that India either open up itself to Chinese FDI or participate in Chinese supply chains. Since then, many top economic leaders, including the Niti Aayog chairman, have recommended that India, for example, get back into the RCEP. That's an organization which we kept out of because we were afraid of the Chinese presence there. I think the feeling now in India is that, the PLI scheme has not really worked. And what you really need, at least in the short term, is more trade with China, more engagement with China, so that we can set up our own economic ecosystem to promote manufacturing in India. And I think what we are witnessing now, that slow return to pre-2020 situation is part of that process. Now we have seen, the reopening of border trade in 3 locations. We have seen the resumption of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. We are likely to see direct flights resuming, tourism resuming. So along with that will come certain changes in the restrictions that were placed on Chinese companies, Chinese FDI, Chinese apps that were placed here in India after Galwan. So I think this is long thought through policy. The government has thought through this very carefully, and it is not a result of Mr. Trump's tariffs, because those tariffs have only come this year. What I am telling you is steps that had been taken in 2024, including the normalization of the situation, the disengagement in the border areas, and subsequent, the summit that took place between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping at Kazan in Russia last year, which is to be now followed by this summit by the summit at the sidelines of this SCO meeting. And I have no doubt in my mind that this will lead to further economic engagement, meaning we already are major trade partners of China. But we had placed a lot of restrictions. Many of those restrictions are actually hurting us. So we need to now pick and choose the areas and ensure that India remains the gainer in any economic relationship.
Right. Right. Thanks, Mr. Joshi. Veena, coming to you, there's also Russia and Pakistan within this SCO framework, China and India. So with all of these, moving parts, where does that leave India? Does it risk being isolated within this grouping?
No, I don't think so. I think India commands great respect within this movement. I think that there will be a bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, which will be important. It is now almost certain that President Putin will visit India maybe 2 months from now. December is being spoken of as a likely date. And so that to prepare for that visit, the bilateral between the two leaders is very important. And I think within the Central Asian countries, our Prime Minister has visited all of them. Our Prime Minister Modi's commands a lot of respect and good friendship. So I think the points that our Prime Minister would like to make, whether it is on security issues, on, to counter terrorism, to counter separatism, all those will be important. I do not know what brief the Prime Minister of Pakistan is coming there with, but certainly I think that I do feel that the summit will be able to come up with a strong statement on counterterrorism. I think that, yes, we have to, Mr. Joshi has spoken a lot about reopening completely the trade deals and the trade interaction with China. I think that is important, but I think I would much rather go to it maybe through the Indo-Pacific trade route, because I think the Japan-led Indo-Pacific, trade agreement that they are working on, I think that is much more important for us. We've already seen by concluding the Indo-ASEAN FTA, for example, that a lot of Chinese goods were coming in. The rules of origin are not strict enough and so on. And we were quite disappointed in that. And that is why with the RCEP also, we withdrew from that because of this concern that in the end that we would not be able to, resist or somehow prevent all these cheap Chinese goods from coming in. So I think that we are very wary of that. There are a lot of concerns about that because a lot of the micro, small and medium entrepreneurs in India, the micro, small and medium units in India are affected by this quite immediately and quite seriously. So while I think that we will work towards a resumption of trade and investment links with China, I think that this will be slow and steady. As we've seen just now, the Chinese withdrew 300 of the engineers who were working at the Foxconn Apple unit in Chennai. So all these problems are there, and that's why I said that one of the first issues is going to be that what Wang Yi promised in India, whether that is going to be the basis for further agreement, whether we move along that, we incorporate those agreements into maybe there will be some kind of joint statement after the bilateral summit between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. And I think that that is going to be looked at very carefully. But I think on the SCO itself, I'm fairly confident that it will be a good statement.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Veena. You make some great points here. But just my last question to Mr. Joshi. You've spoken about the small glimpses we've seen of a thaw in the India-China relationship over the past few years. But how important or how significant do you think the SCO summit is going to be? Can it be considered an inflection point in India-China ties? Could it reset them, or will this remain more about optics at the time? You've seen the red carpet being rolled out for the Prime Minister, so the optics and all are right there. But are you expecting something more substantive to come out of it?
Well, that's a good question. The thing is that SCO is all about optics. There is supposed to be counter-terrorism cooperation and all that within the SCO. What is critical there is the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping. That's at the sidelines. It's a large organization. It's got various divisions. We have, in the sense like all multilateral organizations, it doesn't work too well. But I think the important part of it is the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Xi. And I think that's going to be a part of a continuity meaning from the Kazan meeting to Wang Yi's meeting in Delhi, EAM Jaishankar's meetings in China, and now certain decisions that were already in the pipeline will be finalized by the two leaders in Tianjin. And so that will be, that perhaps could be seen as an inflection point in the re-establishment of good ties, the ties that were left off at about 2019 after the second Chennai summit, after the Chennai summit, I think will be re-established now.
Right. Yeah. Yes, of course, you've both helped us understand, the ramifications of this meet. Thank you so much for both of you for joining in. Now moving on.